Hey guys, how's it going? Just give me a couple of minutes here. I'm going to share us out onto Facebook and then we'll get started. Hey Dan, I'll bring you in as a panelist in just one sec. I'll get us live on Facebook and then I'll bring you in. Everybody else who is just jumping on, say hi in the chat. Let me know where you're dialing in from. I am all the way over in Perth, Australia this morning. Well, it's this morning here. So give me a couple of minutes. I'll get this set up. Hey, Carol. Hi from St. Louis. Awesome. All right. Hey, Dan, how's it going? It's so good to see you. I'm really excited that you're jumping on with us today. Bart will be just on in a few minutes. How's it going?
It's going great. Having a nice sunny day here in Texas. So.
Are you?
You're in the spring down there, aren't you?
I am. So it's finally starting to get warmer. It's been cold, actually. I'm a summer girl, so I really like the sunshine. I wanted to come out to the US over our winter, but I haven't been allowed over for a while. So
no, nobody's allowed in there either.
No, I know, right? That's all right. Yeah, so we're excited to dive into a bunch of topics today. As I said, Bart's going to be a couple of minutes, and I am just going to share us on Facebook because we send it out. Live, so should be good. Sure. So sorry, trying to do a couple of things at once. Awesome. So we have a couple of people on live already. Hey, Eric and Carol. That's awesome. Yeah, so I haven't seen you in ages. I haven't really been, I'm excited to hear kind of some updates on what else you've been up to. You're always up to such amazing stuff, right? There's always something new going on. I see some of the updates in the Facebook group, but I haven't really been as active in there. So so things are going well, things that keep growing, and you got lots on the go? Yeah,
it's booming. I mean, we've got our academy is just building on a monthly basis. Our medical programs are enlarging. We're actually looking at expanding into Cairo, Egypt in the next couple months.
Egypt?
Egypt of all places, yeah. There's a big drive for having performance medicine and longevity medicine. And so they're looking at really expanding across the entire Middle East through the Cairo office. And got a new genetics platform. I don't know if you've been able to do anything with the new platform, but the new platform's pretty incredible.
No, I'll have to check it out. I haven't seen it yet. Wow, that's really interesting. I wouldn't have thought of Egypt. So yeah, crazy. But Dr. Bart, Dr. Dan.
Dr. Dan, welcome.
Hey, Dr. Bart, how you doing?
Doing awesome, thanks. I tell you what, I am so super excited to have you on board tonight. I've had an opportunity to really kind of brush up on some of the work you're doing. So I'm looking forward, I think, in my own selfish ways to dive into some of the work that you're doing and really leading the way. So Karen, let us know if we're dialed in. Let's jump right in.
We are live. So welcome everyone to another episode of the Health Made Simple show. As always, I want to start by introducing our host, Dr. Bart, who has been a healthcare provider for over 20 years, practicing a range of modalities, including chiropractic, acupuncture, kinesiology, nutrition and supplementation, and functional testing, all out of his clinic, Balance Health Studio in Seagrove Beach, Florida. He's also the founder of the Health Edge program, which is a virtual health program for entrepreneurs and executives who want to take their health to the next level. So Dr. Bart has worked with thousands of people all around the world to maximize their health, including athletes and celebrities, and he shares with us all his tips to make health simple every week on this show. So this week, we're also super excited to have our special guest, Dr. Dan Stickler, who is the co-founder and chief medical officer of the Apeiron Center for Human Potential and chief science officer for the Apeiron Academy. So he is the visionary pioneer behind systems-based precision lifestyle medicine, a new paradigm that redefines medicine from the old symptoms-based disease model to one of limitless peak performance in all aspects of life. A physician to high-performing executives and entrepreneurs who want to upgrade their current state. He's also an author, speaker, blogger, and podcaster. So he's the medical director for the Neurohacker Collective, a Google consultant for wearable technology, epigenetics, and AI in healthcare, and a guest lecturer at Stanford University. So Dr. Stickler also has an interesting story, which hopefully you will share with us. He entered medical school with a vision of helping people create an optimized life. And after a number of years working in weight loss surgery, came to the conclusion that surgical approaches to optimizing health was not the ideal option. So now he teaches on optimizing human potential, epigenetics, high performance, and a whole bunch of other topics that are right down our alley here, because we always talk about how we can become superhuman. So thanks so much for jumping on with us, Dan. We're really excited to bring this info to some of our audience.
Oh, happy to be here.
You know, Dan, I got an opportunity to look at some of your bio, and I noticed that. So you were a vascular surgeon, and then you're also a surgeon with laparoscopy, doing a lot of weight loss. And then somewhere along the line, and this is the part I want to dig in before we even get started. I have so many questions for you. I'd love to hear a little bit just how does that happen? Honestly, you're a medical doctor, and you're leading your way in there. You've committed to a profession, committed decades, quite frankly, to, you know, a line of work and very respectable type of work, and you have to be highly trained to do what you were doing. And then you kind of take a pivot, you shift. I'd love to hear what happened, like even for you on a spiritual level or on a, you know, emotional level, what took place right there to make that shift? Because I think that by itself could be a story. I'd love to hear a little about that.
Yeah, that was, you know, it wasn't so much of a shift. It was more of a directive for me, because I got into medical school and I was disenchanted from the time I got in, because I really looked at doctors as being people who improve quality of life, make life better. It's funny because we use the term now, it's not about well-being, it's about more being. And that's what I essentially thought about when I got in there. And here it is, it's about disease and medications. And so I looked at what my options were, and surgery seemed to be the most relevant option for me, because you take somebody who has a certain quality of life, you intervene when their quality of life drops off, and you can bring them at least up to baseline in most of these cases. With weight loss surgery, it was more of taking somebody who was at a lower quality of life and moving them up to a higher quality of life. So that was exciting for me to get into. But one of the things I found in working with these weight loss clients was they would come in and they had all kinds of health issues that nobody was addressing with them. And I ended up managing health issues, and we would have a long period of time that we would try to get everything under control prior to them going into surgery. And what I realized was we were having great success with lifestyle interventions. I went to a place called Epigenetics in Las Vegas and trained under them. And that was my first exposure to medicine for healthy people. And I was like, okay, this is what I thought medicine was. And even that was pretty limited, because it was mostly focused on, you know, optimizing hormones, nutrition, and fitness. And so I adopted that model, and I was doing it as kind of a hobby on the side while I was still doing surgery. And after being in it for 5 years, I stepped away from Epigenetics because I wanted to expand on the model. So we went into all kinds of aspects of human movement, looking at the brain and cognitive function, and most recently we started shifting more into, you know, consciousness and that being aspect of life. And so we gradually developed our own model around that. And after 5 years of overlapping with surgery, I just one day took my gown off in the operating room and I said, you know what, I'm done. I'm stepping away. And it took me announcing it to the room to really have it take hold, because I'd been saying for about a year at that point that when I get here, I'm going to do this. When I get here, I'm going to do this. And that getting here was never happening. So I just kind of made the move, made the announcement, called my office, canceled. I had like 300 cases waiting on my consultation list, canceled them all. And I went from making $600,000 a year to making $57,000 that first year. But it was the best year of my life. I was doing what I absolutely loved. And it started growing, and I'd gotten into genetics early on back in 2007, and I was using it in my practice, and it became a huge part of our teaching for other physicians. And then epigenetics, which nobody really knew much about. And so I got into epigenetics from the get-go, and really what I realized is that epigenetics is really the key to health. That's the real answer for me. And it flows so well into this more being and this lifestyle approach to optimizing the human state. And, you know, we don't have limits to what we can achieve. I mean, you know, people look at getting healthy, but I'm well beyond that. I mean, I just say, where do you want to be and how do we get you there? So it's beyond just healthy. It's a matter of just optimizing total being.
Wow, that there's a lot right there. So I think I think if we're going to jump into all these, I know in a moment I'm going to have you define the best that you can epigenetics. It's a term we've used a lot. Karen and I use that a lot here on our show, but I want to dive into that. But just prior to that, just the fact that you one day just kind of called it quits, that by itself, quite frankly, and listening to what you're saying there is that you've evolved into now talking about consciousness and being in life. And yet that move you made back then, that was a life-changing move that I think a lot of people are afraid to make sometimes when they don't ask that question, where do you want to be in your life? So thank you. That's huge right there. So let's talk epigenetics for a moment. So so I have a lot of people, I've been practicing for a couple of decades, and you've seen this as well. They come in and they say, well, doc, I got a bad shoulder. It must be genetics. My dad had one. And they think genetics is wrapped up into these different ailments and it gets passed on. If you would, in the simplest way that you can, talk to us a little bit about what is epigenetics relative to genetics or DNA.
Well, I think first we go into what genetics tells us. And, epigenetics is definitely king on this, but it doesn't mean that genetics isn't important. And a lot of people don't realize is that when you get your 23andMe, or when you get, the Apeiron genetic array, or you get Ancestry.com, you're getting something called polymorphisms, single nucleotide polymorphisms. These are the less than 0.5% of the 3 billion base pairs in our DNA that makes every individual different. This isn't looking at the genes. I mean, some of these are in genes, but they are variations. And a lot of people will refer to them as mutations, like MTHFR or ApoE, and they're not truly mutations. I mean, from a genetic standpoint, they're far from mutations. They're polymorphisms, and they only really occur for some evolutionary benefit in the human being. So looking at genetics, you can't look at it from a negative eye of saying, oh, you're unfortunate because you have this. It doesn't work that way. It means that you have genetics that if you adopt a certain lifestyle, you can really optimize the way they work. And a lot of people don't match that with their lifestyle. Now, that said, epigenetics is it's kind of the overlay on the genome. This is the ability to actually change expression. And there's different forms of epigenetics. There's epigenetics that gets written on the code that gets kind of locked in. We say that's written in pen, so it's hard to erase. But then throughout life, we have epigenetics that's written in pencil. And these are things based on our lifestyle that we can actually have control over the expressions of genes. So I like to compare it to a dimmer switch. You have a dimmer switch on a gene and you can turn it up, turn it down, turn it on, turn it off through epigenetics. And we're gradually learning how to do that. And as more information comes in, we're understanding how impactful every aspect of lifestyle is. I mean, even just food. I mean, you think of food as a macronutrient, but I look at food as a bioactive. These are bioactive nutrients because every food we consume has some effect on gene expressions. And so it's nice to be able to leverage that based on what we know of your code. And then in talking with you, how that code's expressing, and then we can look at ways to intervene to change the expression of that code. And that's been working really well for us.
It's awesome. So I wrote down this thing. I was listening to like a podcast or a talk you did. And I wrote down this quote that you said, there are no limits to our potential. So when you just said what you just said, it don't, for someone like myself as a practitioner, but even just as a guy who's 50 years old, who's trying to continuously level up, it actually excites me. Yeah. When I hear that. And I hope that our audience tonight is almost letting this sink in and be like, well, if I adopt a lifestyle based on my genetics, based on my genes, then I can continuously level them up. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Well, it's not quite that far. I mean, the genes are just, you know, when we look at our genetic code, when we look at these single nucleotide polymorphisms, it's like having another value like lab work. Okay, we have this value, even though the genetic code is fixed and what it does, the expression of that code can change. So looking at it, we understand, you know, let's take somebody who was an Inuit Eskimo, you know, grew up there, had ancestry through there, and then all of a sudden they moved to New York City. They're going to carry genetic polymorphisms, and this is how ancestry works. I mean, when they use these things to determine ancestry, they compare them to what was selected out in those populations and what has been passed down. So this person moves to New York City, and ancestrally, they've been selected to eat a diet that's like 80% fat. And so their genes are optimized for that environment, and suddenly they're in a different environment. And if they don't consume a diet like that, if they start consuming starches and higher carbohydrates, they're going to get heart disease. They're going to run the risks of many health problems because they're not eating for the genetics that they carry. Now, you take the opposite of that, and somebody from an Asian culture that comes in whose ancestry has been a diet predominantly of starchy vegetables, and then you put them on a high-fat diet, they're going to get heart disease. So there's no perfect human diet, but you can use the genes to really guide and give higher probability of what dietary pattern is going to work. And that doesn't mean it's always going to do that. And so we're big on data. And with that, anything that we do to intervene, we look and we try to narrow down the highest probability. And then we say, okay, what metrics are we going to watch to see if this is actually, if we're guessing correctly? And so we watch the metrics over time, and sure enough, most of the time we've got it nailed down pretty well because we've gathered all this data from the get-go. We don't have to go through trial and error periods over long periods of time. We can actually dial it in and then measure it, and if it's working, then we continue with it. And that's the great thing about genetics and understanding them and not using them as some absolute. I mean, let's just take MTHFR. So MTHFR, everybody looks at as this really awful curse that you have when you have a heterozygous or homozygous MTHFR, yet over 25% of the population has that. Well, how is that of any benefit? Well, it is a benefit. If you look at like an African ancestry, you're going to see a lot more people with MTHFR homozygous. Well, guess what? There's actually a benefit to having that because fetal survival of a fetus that has homozygous MTHFR 677T, they actually have a greater survival chance in a environment where there's a high folate intake. And in the African environment, they looked at it, and even in malnourished environments in Africa, there's high folate in the diet. it also codes for the fact that you have a higher resistance to colon cancer if you carry MTHFR, homozygous, and you eat a folate-rich diet. So what that's telling us is that, yes, you have homozygous MTHFR, get enough folate in the diet, because if you have enough folate, that's where that gene variant thrives. And so we can't look at any variant as a good or a bad. We just look at it as a direction.
You know, I think that's a great way of putting it, especially in the last couple of years as functional medicine is becoming more and more popular. We see that very gene that you're talking about, the MTHFR, become this like bad guy, and everyone's hunting for it. So thanks for kind of giving some clarity to that. So let's dive a little deeper into the epigenetics. So, you know, we're talking about lifestyle. We're talking about eating and moving and exercising. Let's talk about stress for a moment. Yeah. So, you know,
there might be a little stress in society right now, you know.
Yeah. And it's, you know, it's one of these X factors, I think. And I think too often we discount the power of it. And I'm sure you've experienced what I've seen. I've seen, you know, my clients with phenomenal diets. They have exercise routines that are, you know, as good as they get. And yet their body still doesn't perform the way they want. They don't feel as good. They're emotionally beat. They're hormonally imbalanced. And it's because of that key thing of stress. Talk about the impact. And I know everyone knows it's important, but I think it's real important that we really understand the impact, especially when it comes to epigenetics.
Well, we could talk an entire show on this. It's funny because right before COVID hit, we were in the process of creating what we call the Anti-Fragile Human course, which is all about becoming stress resilience. I don't like the term stress resilient. I like anti-fragile. You keep yourself in the state so that, you know, you're always there, because people look at, you know, how we respond to stress. And there's basically 3 tiers of that, where we come in and we face a stressor and we come away with the body in a more compromised state after the stressor. Then there's stressors that we come into and we're able to face them fine and bounce back and get back to baseline. And then there's the anti-fragile state, whereas we come into a stressor and we actually come out on the other side stronger. And that was, I mean, we did 75 modules on that topic. We had psychologists, we had sleep doctors, we had, and these are all members of our team. We had special forces physician, and we had some special forces people who are like the prime example of anti-fragility. But it's important when it comes to stress, because the 3 different tiers of impact that it can have on you, to really get yourself into that anti-fragile state where we actually are gaining strength with every stressor that we encounter. And, you know, life, you know, everybody is all about happiness and this pursuit of happiness. And I think we've gone off base there. You know, we don't need that pursuit of happiness. We need a pursuit of more being. And what I mean by that is, happiness is a side effect of that. And so we're chasing the feeling and not really the purpose. You know, you look at Mother Teresa, and she had one of the best well-being scores you could ever imagine, but was she happy all the time? No. I mean, she led a stressful life, but she led a life with purpose. And that ranks up there well above this positive psychology aspect of, oh, just be happy. You know, that's not life. And you know, life becomes better when you do have stressors and when you have times of ecstasy and all of this. So, you know, what we want to emphasize with people is don't focus so much on just this happiness pursuit. Focus on the pursuit of experience and being human and experiencing this to its fullest extent, the good, the bad, the ugly of it.
I love that. And I guess that's what helps us make changes from being a surgeon to someone leading the force here now in genetics, which is awesome. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about types of testing. So I think we mentioned just a moment ago, 23andMe, there's Ancestry out there. I think there's another company called CRI. And I use a couple other companies like in my office that might do some genetic testing. Maybe you can just give us a broad view of what type of testing's out there, what's of value. And I'll tell you, these are some of the things that show up in my office. I have people come in, they hand me a stack of tests. Like the most common one I'll get is 23andMe, and they say, "Hey doc, look what I got." And they hand it to me and they say, "What do I do with this?" Maybe you can shed some light on that, because I know that you have certain testing that's available, but maybe you can kind of like give us a broad view of what's out there for someone that might, for the first time, know that there is genetic testing that we can do that tell us more than just what country we came from.
Well, the one that you hear a lot about is whole genome testing. This is where they map out 3 billion base pairs, creates an enormous database. Problem is we don't know what to do with it. So here we have this enormous database of all of these base pairs of the genome. And if you recall what I said at the beginning, greater than 99.5% of those are going to be identical in every person in the world. I mean, that's just amazing to think about. Over 99.5%. So we want to get that less than 0.5% that makes each of us different. Those are actionable. Okay. Now we can look at mutations in the whole genome and find mutations, but the majority of the time there's nothing you can do for them. All they will do is to tell you, well, you're going to die of cancer by the time you're 50. Nobody wants to know that. I don't like that. I don't test that. And in fact, most of the people are going away from the whole genome testing, not only because of that reason, but also because that database is so big, it's hard to extract into anything usable. The next area is exome testing, which is where you're actually looking at the base pairs that are only responsible for the proteins that are created by genes. Okay, so there's introns and exons in every gene segment of the genome, and in those, only a certain percentage of those are actually used to code for what that gene makes. So you're only looking at the exons. So exome analysis it started to get popularity because they said, oh, this is actually mapping the genes that we do have. But what they found is that they were missing a ton of stuff. There are polymorphisms within genes that don't code for anything, but they have a huge impact as far as lifestyle is concerned, and they were being eliminated in that. So that's why we've always gone with single nucleotide polymorphisms, and these are the ones that give the variability of us being human and what makes us different and what actions that we can take from a lifestyle standpoint to actually optimize our life. So, all of these ancestry companies, 23andMe, our genetic tests, they all look at single nucleotide polymorphisms. And I think ours actually has one of the largest testing. I think we look at 690,000 variants, but there's 10 million single nucleotide polymorphisms. So we're still only looking at less than 10% of the single nucleotide polymorphisms. And the main reason is because we haven't tested, we don't have data from research that tells us anything about most of them. We're gradually learning that, but this is where the focus needs to be is on single nucleotide polymorphism testing. If we're talking about optimizing the human and actually having actionable parameters to really go after.
So when someone runs a test like this, what kind of data are they getting? Like, what are they going home? Are they finding out different foods that would serve them better? Like we talked about different cultures. Are they talking about something in their genetic code that helps them be better? They might have weaker ligaments or tendons. What kind of depth, what can they extract from these tests?
So right now we look at about 600 ones in particular. And with the 600 we look at nutrition, supplementation, sleep, exercise, hormones, methylation and detoxification, environmental health, neurotransmitters, social predictions, which is kind of interesting. It's a new one for us. And we look at endocannabinoid response. We look at MDMA response for people. I mean, as new research comes out, we're constantly adding new things and testing them. And this is one thing that I've always been adamant about in our practice. I had my genetic testing array that I built from 2007, and it wasn't until 2015 that I actually allowed it to be used for anybody other than my patients. So I only used it in my own patients. I did clinical vetting on this. I mean, there were some that the research said these are really relevant, and I found that they had no relevance whatsoever in my clientele. So I said, okay, I don't like that one. And then I found others that don't have much research, but they were really having a high impact. So we're one of the only clinically vetted genetic testing reports on the market right now, which we're pretty proud of, because most of the other companies were businesses that decided they wanted to be a business of genetic testing. We were a medical center that really had no aspirations of being a genetic testing company, but we became one. And it's been really successful with the coaches that we train on the interpretation, but more importantly, we train the coaches on the epigenetics. So in our academy, our teaching is on the how to interpret the genetics, but it's not as in-depth as because that's not the way genetics work. I mean, genetics is correlation. You know, when we look at these genetic SNPs, the majority of them, 90% of them, are correlations, not causations. There's only a few that are causations. So when we look at the correlations, we look at probabilities and we say, okay, this is the probability of what's going on. Let me talk to you and find out what's expressing. And then I can formulate a way to actually kind of create an expression that's more optimized for you through nutrition, through exercise, through meditation, through sleep, whatever it is. We can do that and that's what we teach, is how do you actually make these things actionable for people to make lifestyle choices.
That's awesome. And I think, again, for everyone listening tonight, that there's that big difference. There's a key thing right there, that correlation versus causation. So often, you know, you'll hear like, oh, it's genetic. And, you know, some of the research I've seen is a lot of the diseases out there, maybe 3 to 5% is causation. Meaning that is truly caused by your genes, but means 95%, 97% of all these ailments we see out there are correlation, meaning the epigenetics, the lifestyle type stuff that we're doing. So awesome. All right. So let's move forward again here. So, and another topic I saw when I was researching you, and just kind of looking at things, peptides. Peptides is a new buzz. It's a lot of people aren't even familiar with it. They're you know, it's used a lot, I think, right now in anti-aging and bodybuilding. Can you talk a little bit about peptides and really what they are and where you see them going in the future?
Yeah, so peptides are basically strings of amino acids. The only difference between a peptide and a protein is the number of amino acids in it. So, you know, you string a couple peptides together and you get a protein. But peptides, I love peptides. I mean, I think this is the next generation of medicine. Between microRNAs and exosomes and peptides, I think we're going to be looking at a whole new ballgame in medicine and health. But the peptides, the body actually knows these. I mean, we make peptides that are similar to what the body makes, except we take pieces of them. And we know what one piece of it does. Like, let's take growth hormone protein as an example. So growth hormone protein is this huge string of amino acids kind of curled up into like a yarn-like ball, and it has all these receptor sites on it. So it's like the way I like to look at it is if you had a ring of keys, this growth hormone is this ring of keys. Well, this key here will plug into fat cells and cause this response. This key here will plug into neurons in the hypothalamus and induce sleep. And this key will cause muscle growth or bone growth. And what we do with the peptides is we take just pieces of that growth hormone. So we take this key off and we can take that key and inject it. And so we can get a directed response that is really laser focused. I mean, when we look at how medications work or supplements work, there is an on-target effect and an off-target effect. I don't know of many things that don't have a pro and a con. So everything that we put into our bodies, we have to look at the pro and con and make sure that the balance comes out in the positive. But with peptides, it's like 90% positive and 10% on off-target stuff, because you've taken something the body's actually familiar with and knows where it's supposed to lock into a receptor. And we've just taken that piece and just flooded the body with it. And so we get the response that we're looking at. And the off-target effect is rare with the peptides. So we've got a lot of them out there. I mean, we have over 60 peptides that we have access to that have a huge range of effects. I mean, from tanning the skin to curing the symptoms of chronic inflammatory response syndrome, to muscle growth, to bone growth, to erections, to healing injured ligaments and muscles. I mean, it's amazing what we have available out there to boost the immune system. This is a big one for this COVID era.
And the use of these peptides, are they being used based on the lab tests or more of the genetic testing, or can it be done without either?
Well, I don't think you should rely on any single test. I mean, I'm not a big fan of this get to the core, the underlying core of what's going on, because I don't think the human system works that way. We are a complex adaptive system, and we have a series of organ systems that are constantly interacting, giving feedback, giving local responses, giving global responses. And so it's rare that you ever find anything that is that single common denominator that's causing something. It's always a series of things that are happening that are creating that. So what we do is we gather as much data as we can. I mean, we get blood work, we get genetics, we get, we map the brain, we monitor the stress response. All these things are going on at one time, and we paint a picture of where this human system is in that moment. And we say, what is the highest probability of pushing this human system to a more optimized state? And that's where we come up with a plan for the way we're going to do it.
I think that's a great way of looking at it. There's because the body's so dynamic. I don't even think it's complicated. I think it's brilliant, and it's always shifting and adapting. And I think too often, I think I've been trapped there myself. Sometimes we look at a lab test and we're just trying to manipulate the lab test. And that doesn't necessarily dictate human function or how we feel or how we're going to move forward into our lives. So I think that's a great way of putting it, of kind of taking that overall observation of where we want to go, where are we at, and then how do we, wean ourselves there, and what risk reward do we want along the way. All right, so that's the peptides, and I guess so these are injectable peptides, and obviously, like I said, they're amino acids, so they have, that's what our bodies are made of proteins. So that sounds like it's relatively a safe. Moving forward, it sounds like something that's very safe and has very, very low risk, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah, and to clarify, there are some that are topical. I mean, we actually have one that we sell in our store that's an oral form that has been the most effective at healing the gut of anything. I rarely say anything gives 100%, but every single client that I've put this on, from dysbiosis to inflammatory bowel disease, we give them BPC 157, and within a month, we have regulated their bowel function. I mean, it heals the bowel. And what's amazing about it is it doesn't actually do anything directly within the microbiome. What it does is it increases the capillaries in the lining of the gut. So it allows the gut to heal. And so we just have people doing their healthy dietary plan and their healthy lifestyle, allowing the gut to heal. And the body's amazing at healing itself when it's given the right resources. And by getting that increased blood flow into the lining of the gut, it heals the leaky gut. It allows more nutrients to get to the lining of the gut. And it's amazing how often we see complete regressions of whatever's been going on.
I love how you put that, because the body is designed to heal itself, and our jobs, the best that we can, is to give them the tools. It's almost like giving the mechanic everything they need to build the house properly, or to fix the car. So that's great. All right, so I know this is kind of an obvious answer, yet so I'm not 20 anymore, and maybe you aren't either. Maybe a little whatever.
A little over that.
Talk about muscle building.
Mm-hmm.
I see this trend going away. Well, I don't know if it's away from it, but we don't talk about it, building muscle and having muscle mass into our later, our 50s and our 60s and our 70s and our 80s, as much as I've heard about in the past. And I'm a big advocate of making sure that we have good lean muscle mass. Talk to me, in this scheme of things, where do you put the role of having a decent amount of just lean muscle mass in the body in longevity, quite frankly?
Well, I mean, the key there is frailty. Frailty of aging is one of the biggest factors in longevity and disease. And we naturally lose muscle mass, and that's secondary mostly to the hormonal depletion that occurs, or the natural aging of the body. I look at aging as a disease to fight, not a natural process. It's what the body does, but it's not necessarily the good thing that the body does. I don't know if Karen, you didn't see the post we did today. So we do a lot of work on epigenetic aging, and I posted an article in our group that talked about how athletes, and more so strength and power athletes than aerobic athletes, have accelerated epigenetic aging. So their aging clock is higher. And I've seen this. So I've worked with a lot of athletes, and I have especially Ironman triathletes. I had one guy that was 10 years older by his epigenetic age than his chronologic age, and the guy was very fit. But it was interesting because what they found was it was based on two genes that were hypermethylated. So when they get hypermethylated, they're very good indicators of aging of the body from a biologic standpoint. But both of these genes, when turned down, which was what happens when they become methylated, when they get turned down, they actually reduce your incidence of heart disease and cancer. So it's one of those conundrums that you look at and you go, okay, so are we wrong on the epigenetic clocks or what? Because we know exercise is healthy. That's the irony of it. Exercise is this thing that creates more free radicals than anything that we can do in a single day. It tears muscle, it traumatizes hemorrhages in joints, and yet we look at it as healthy. How is that? Well, that's stress. That's the good part of stress. It's a hormetic effect because the body says, ooh, I'm in an environment that I need to make changes to be stronger because I'm getting exposed to this kind of trauma. And suddenly the body epigenetically changes expression to become stronger. This is the anti-fragile state. But you can't take a single test like this, as you can see from this disparity that you get of aging versus reduced disease, because I know those athletes are going to be aging much better than most people. So we're still in a learning process with most of this.
Yeah, I've witnessed some of the same. I'll do some wearables with some of my clients, and I remember one time I was measure some HRV. Yeah, so just different things, right, to just give us data, like you said. And I was monitoring some HRV on what I consider, it's a high class athlete, doing everything from CrossFit competitions, everything to all the stuff that are just harder than humans should usually do. And his HRV scores were consistently some of the lowest I've ever seen for a 30-year-old. And everything else, phenomenal. Heart rate, good, body fat percentages, everything else I was monitoring was phenomenal except his HRV. And it was an eye-opener that sometimes we can put too much stress in the body, and then over push it. And that's where the strategies of having this data can be so helpful. You talk about that.
I am a huge data fan. I mean, data is the king. And, I've got my wearable on. I haven't taken it off my wrist in 4 years. And what you're talking about there, though, when somebody whose stress level really tanks like that, I would look at them and think overtraining, because that's one of the things that we do is I look at all of my clients, their stress score, their HRV, their resting heart rate, their sleep, and their body battery. We use Garmin's so that we get body battery. And I look at it every week. And I'm on a call with all my clients once a month to review their dashboard and see how they're doing. But if I see something happening in that week, I'll ping them and say, hey, what's going on? But if somebody's not recovering after heavy exercise, I'll have them wait until that body battery comes back up and their stress level comes back up, because it's so indicative of what's happening with the body. And once you get a baseline with it, you have a pretty good metric to measure in a person. You can't say everything's accurate, like sleep measurements and things like that, but what's accurate is it's consistent for that person. When something intervenes with that and changes it, you want to know.
So what are some of your favorite wearables? What kind of data do you like to gain?
With all of our medical clients, we have them on the Garmin, either the Phoenix 6 or the Garmin Mark, just because of the metrics that we can get with that. I've done some work with biostraps. I like those for people who don't want to wear the watch. That gives some decent information. And then the Oura Ring is the third option for them, but I like the continuous data that I get with the Garmin's. And some people are like, oh, I can't wear that to bed. I'm like, I wouldn't wear a ring or a watch for 45 years, and I haven't taken this thing off my wrist since I got it. If I can tolerate it, anybody can tolerate it. So, and we wake up, my wife and I wake up every morning and we're like, what's your stress score? And seeing if our body battery got to, and it's like a competition. And what a great thing to be obsessed about, though.
It really is. I love that you mentioned that, because we're the same way in our house. So these data, like they give us like good targets every day to wake up to. And then again, if you like the outcome it's given you, awesome. If you don't, you make some adjustments and modifications for the day, and then you continue to execute, which is awesome. All right, so let's back up. I think a big part of this is earlier in this conversation, I said I've had people come into my office say, hey, Doc, I have my that big stack of 23andMe. So talk a little bit about, because I know that you have coaches, your program, you have testing, but also you've trained people to analyze that and then coach people on what to do it. I've seen some of the testing results, and you need a coach. Like, these aren't tests you just want to get the data and just kind of sit and collect dust for. Can you share a little bit about what you guys provide?
Yeah, I think coaching is going to supplant most of medicine. Physicians should be taking care of people who are sick, and still have coaches that work with lifestyle, because the physicians don't know anything about lifestyle. And I can say that because I'm a physician and I didn't learn anything about lifestyle. But the coaches are ideal for working with clients on this stuff, and they will prevent more. You look at the top 10 causes of death in the United States. 8 of those are strictly lifestyle oriented. People will say, oh, I've got genetics, but you know what? It doesn't matter. Even if you have these genetics for diabetes or heart disease, epigenetics tells us you can actually completely eliminate that risk. So you just follow a lifestyle. That's where the coaches are going to come in, and they're being able to do that through the science of epigenetics. I have physicians that will say, that epigenetic stuff is just woo. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. There are 18,000 peer-reviewed articles a year that come out in epigenetics. There are hundreds of clinical studies going on. I teach epigenetics. I'm a guest lecturer in the epigenetics course at Stanford every year, and I teach on how to use genetics and epigenetics for nutritional planning. But it just amazes me how many people don't understand. But you also have to understand that epigenetics is so loosely used on the internet to explain everything that's unexplainable, which kind of makes it difficult to really break into that true scientific realm of it. But that's what we teach the coaches. We teach them the genetics, but teach them the genetics in using it as probabilities, not as absolutes. Mm-hmm. So they learn the genetics, but with that, we teach them how you can use epigenetics to work on the expressions to optimize people, because that's where the action really takes place. And when you start showing people these changes, especially with metrics, you can, even just heart rate can be used for monitoring a diet. You put somebody on a different diet and you check their heart rate change over the course of a month, and you see a dramatic drop, a 5-point drop in heart rate, you're doing something right. It's funny because when people go on a new diet plan, there's always this euphoric stage in the first 2 to 3 weeks. And what they're doing is they're stressing their body, because they've changed their baseline. The body's in this familiar zone. Suddenly you give it a totally different diet and you're in a stress zone. And what happens with stress? You secrete cortisol. Well, what does cortisol do to the brain? It gives a euphoric effect. So they mistake the euphoric effect. This diet is great. It's working for me. And then, 4 weeks sets in, they feel like crap. And all of their health metrics are crashing because they're on a diet that the body wasn't designed to consume. We see that with people when they go on, vegetarian or carnivore or keto. It's great for some people, but you've got to figure out if you're the person that's going to do best with that diet, because you can mistake that euphoria for something it's not really doing.
Yeah, not all diets are for all people. That's for certain. All right, so so obviously, when they do the genetic testing, the coaches kind of walk them through it. Is that type of testing something that you just do it one time, once a year? What's usually the suggestion there?
Well, the great thing about it is your genetics don't change.
Sure.
Yeah, your genetics are fixed. So you only need the test once. And then, like our platform is interesting because our platform now adopts to changes. So if we come up with a new study on like an area of insulin resistance, and suddenly we have 4 new SNPs that are highly relevant in that, we'll go in and plug them in, and your data is in there. All you have to click is update, and it will update your report. So you've got all these changes. If we add a new, like this social programming genetic template that we have, we look at anger issues and all that. Once that goes live, everybody that's got their genetics in there, they just have to click and say, generate my report, and it'll generate it based on your data that you've already got in there. So there's nothing else that you have to do from that standpoint.
That's fantastic. So I know if Karen, if there's a link for Dr. Dan or something that we could point people direction to, if they maybe want to get testing or more information, Doc, maybe that's a link we can post in our feed here tonight and share out to all our viewers here.
Oh, well, I can actually make a major announcement that our corporation is making a change, actually.
Let's hear it.
Yeah, so Karen doesn't even know about this. Actually, none of the coaches know about this. We have always been adamant about not having direct-to-consumer options on our genetics. We've resisted that for many years, and so many people have been coming to me and saying, we can reach more people with the direct-to-consumer model. Problem is, genetics don't work well in direct-to-consumer, and this is the reason we don't do it, because you have to have the epigenetic piece. You have to talk to somebody to understand whether this is, and people who understand genetics. And so what we are doing now is we're actually launching a direct-to-consumer, and in each section of the report, and the report will include nutrition, supplementation, sleep, and fitness. But in each of the sections of the report, I do a video about the report, and I tell people about the importance of having the coach to actually interpret this for you, because, I can tell you all this stuff, but it doesn't mean anything unless you're actually interacting or a great deal about genetics. So what we had come to the conclusion with some market testing was that we could get more clients for our coaches by offering it direct to consumer, because there was a higher volume of uptake of it. And then the people understood the need for the coach once they got into it. So we're actually launching that next week, and we're going to be on Shark Tank Discovery. So that is going to really launch us in November. So we need coaches. We need certified coaches. So anybody who's a coach out there, we're actually in the process of revamping our entire academy. So our academy is like 90 hours right now, but we're changing the entire thing at the first of the year, and everybody who is registered now will get the new academy too. So you can go in and learn all the stuff right now, and then we start teaching some really cool advanced stuff. You'll learn about peptides too. We teach about peptides in there, but we really need coaches, because I think we're going to be overwhelmed with the volume of people coming in. And we actually refer the people who come in from our tests to our coaches out there, and the coaches are all independent. So we're actually giving clients to our coaches.
That's awesome. In perfect timing here, something you said earlier, I think the future of, like see medicine or really healthcare or leveling up is like we like to talk about it, is really going to be in the hands of coaches, of people that are talking more lifestyle and talking about epigenetics and understanding those versus just taking what's already wrong and trying to fix that. I mean, we need that too, don't get me wrong. But I think the future of us moving forward, and I think this whole COVID thing has really got us a little bit of like, a slap upside the head saying, hey, wake up. The biggest issue we have here is that we have, tens and hundreds of millions of people that are unhealthy. And if we change their epigenetics and change lifestyle stuff, probably wouldn't have to shut down the world. But nonetheless, all right. So, one of my favorite things that you said tonight was, and you said it, I'm gonna paraphrase it a little bit, but to pursue your purpose, more so than just happiness. And I know for myself in the work that I get to do every day, and I say get because I'm blessed to be able to do this kind of stuff. I love the fact that your journey here has got you to this point, and the fact that you're going on Shark Tank, it's going to be a whole nother level. And I love seeing that purpose. And I know that those things don't happen without purpose. They're not good business strategies. That doesn't work. It doesn't push it that far. So thank you for just kind of being really a pioneer in this. We're in the same field, and yet obviously you're pushing the envelope with where we're going with this, and this is kind of speeding things up. So we're getting close on time here. So Karen, if you would, I know we always have a question at the end for our guests, and I want to say thanks for being here. But Karen has a question for you, a big question. So hopefully you're ready and feeling smart.
Well, we are the Health Made Simple show, so we always like to wrap it up and make health simple for our listeners. So we like to end on the question, what is one action item that everyone here today can take to move them towards their goal of becoming superhuman?
That is so hard. Oh,
it's the hardest question.
That's like finding the lowest common denominator. I would say, from all of our work with clients, the most prevalent issue that we have to work with is their sleep. They just don't get quality sleep. And I tell people, I've had people that came in for weight loss and all we did was get them sleeping, and all of a sudden they lost weight like crazy. I mean, sleep interferes with so many processes of the body that I think sleep is probably the most important thing to get under control first. But this complex body, we need to address it altogether. Even if we have somebody that comes in with MS, we don't address their MS. We're addressing their nutrition, their fitness, their sleep, their hormones. We address the whole thing. So we treat everybody almost identically, no matter what they come in with, because it's all about lifestyle, and it's that complete lifestyle that makes things work. And so you can't expect to, just do nutrition and fitness and expect to lose weight if you're not sleeping, if your stress level's high. All these things play together. So you have to address them all. But if you are forcing me to pick one thing, I would say get the sleep together first. Yeah.
And obviously they do, we're looking at it. People need to look at it as a whole picture, but it's good to, sometimes people do need to do one step at a time and start with something. But you've given us so much amazing info tonight. So thank you so much again for coming on. We so appreciate you being here. And for everyone listening, we will be back at 6 p.m. CST next Tuesday.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Dan, thank you for being here. Thank you for putting down your scalpel and leading the way, in the future here. And what I don't even think you got into is that Dr. Dan trains other practitioners. So I want to thank you for that. You're literally changing thousands and thousands and probably millions of lives, more than you think so. So thank you for all the work that you put in. I know we haven't seen the best of probably what you're about to bring to the table. So thank you once again. And for all the listeners, I'm gonna steal this from Dr. Dan here. Pursue your purpose. Always keep raising the bar. Find that purpose. It just drives life that much more. And then, of course, we're going to take deliberate action for our minds, for our bodies, and our overall wellness. Y'all be